The line is the world's most expensive contradiction, and honestly, it's been exhausting. One week, we're seeing massive construction updates, cranes everywhere, workers pouring concrete. The next week, reports surface that the project's been scaled back to almost nothing. 47 billion tons of materials, 170 kilometers of mirrored walls, 9 million residents living in a straight line through the Saudi desert, a $1 trillion price tag that dwarfs most countries' entire economies. The question we keep asking ourselves, is this the most expensive failure before it was even built? Let's find out what really happened to Saudi Arabia's impossible dream. Picture this: a mirrored wall stretching 170 kilometers across the desert, 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 9 million people living inside what's essentially a horizontal skyscraper with no cars, no roads, no traditional city planning whatsoever. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wanted to redefine human civilization itself. The engineering challenges were staggering from day one. How do you move 9 million people efficiently in a straight line? Traditional cities spread outward for a reason. When everyone lives in a line, getting from point A to point B becomes a nightmare of bottlenecks and choke points. Then there's the desert itself. Sand that shifts constantly, temperatures that swing from scorching heat to freezing cold, winds that can sandblast steel, supply chains that would need to stretch across hundreds of kilometers of empty wasteland. The water problem alone should have stopped this project cold. 9 million people need water, lots of it. In one of the world's driest regions, the desalination plants required would consume more energy than some entire countries use. But construction started anyway. We watched the early footage. Massive excavators carving foundations into bedrock, concrete trucks rolling across the desert. The scale was undeniably impressive. The renders looked incredible. Skiing slopes inside the walls, artificial beaches, vertical farms stretching up the interior surfaces, a high-speed rail system that could transport residents from one end to the other in 20 minutes. Engineering experts immediately called it impossible. The structural loads alone would require materials that don't exist yet. The energy requirements would demand multiple nuclear power plants. The maintenance costs would bankrupt most nations. Yet the Saudi government kept pushing forward. Press conferences promised groundbreaking innovations. Marketing videos showed gleaming interiors and impossible geometries. International contractors signed billion-dollar deals. The timeline was equally ambitious. First residents by 2030, full completion by 2039. A complete reimagining of urban living in just over a decade. What we were watching was the collision between unlimited ambition and the hard laws of physics, between marketing renders and engineering reality, between a vision of the future and the constraints of the present. The foundation work continued, concrete poured, steel erected. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Engineers were running calculations, accountants were adding up costs. Project managers were discovering that moving mountains of sand is one thing. Moving 9 million people through a straight line is something else entirely. The cracks in the vision weren't visible from the outside yet, but they were forming. Deep structural problems that no amount of money or ambition could solve. And we kept watching, waiting to see if Saudi Arabia could actually pull off the impossible. Then the reports started coming in, and they weren't good. First, it was the timeline. That ambitious 2030 deadline for first residents, quietly pushed back. The full 170-kilometer vision? Suddenly, officials were talking about a phased approach. We started digging deeper into what was actually happening on the ground. Construction crews were being scaled back. Major contractors were walking away from deals. The workforce that had peaked at thousands was shrinking month by month. The numbers told the real story. That 170-kilometer line, cut down to just 2.4 kilometers by 2030, 9 million residents, try a few thousand, maybe tens of thousands if they're lucky. But here's what really caught our attention. The engineering problems weren't getting solved, they were getting worse. Take transportation. Moving people efficiently through a straight line is mathematically impossible at scale. Every simulation showed the same result: massive bottlenecks, hours-long commutes, and system failures that would strand thousands of residents. The water infrastructure became a nightmare. Desalination plants powerful enough to serve 9 million people would require their own dedicated power grid. The energy costs alone would consume a significant chunk of Saudi Arabia's oil revenue. Then there's the structural engineering. A 500-meter tall wall stretching 170 kilometers needs foundations that go deep into bedrock. But the desert geology isn't uniform. Some sections have solid rock. Others have shifting sand that goes down hundreds of meters. The foundation costs for the full project would exceed the GDP of most countries. We've seen this pattern before. Remember Jeddah Tower? The kilometer-tall skyscraper that was supposed to redefine skylines. Construction stopped in 2018. Still sits there, unfinished, a skeletal reminder of ambition meeting reality. Or Forest City in Malaysia, a $100 billion project to house 700,000 people on artificial islands. Beautiful renders, massive initial investment, international headlines. Today, mostly empty buildings and broken promises. The line was following the same trajectory. The difference? The scale of the failure was unprecedented. Financial pressure mounted from multiple directions. Oil revenues fluctuated. Other Vision 2030 projects demanded funding. The Red Sea project, NEOM's other zones, the new capital city, all competing for the same pool of money. Saudi officials started changing their language. Instead of, "the line will house 9 million people," we heard, "the line will demonstrate new urban concepts." Instead of 170 kilometers by 2039, we got phased development based on demand. The moment we knew the original vision was dead, when they announced the pivot strategy. NEOM would focus on other zones. The line would become a proof of concept rather than a complete reimagining of urban living. Behind closed doors, engineers were telling a different story. The linear city concept works for small communities, maybe a few thousand people, but scaling it to millions creates problems that no amount of money can solve. Traffic flow, emergency evacuation, utility distribution, waste management, every system breaks down when forced into a straight line. The desert wasn't cooperating either. Sandstorms damaged equipment, extreme temperatures cracked concrete. Supply chains stretched across hundreds of kilometers of empty land proved impossible to maintain efficiently. International contractors started walking away, not because of payment issues, but because the engineering challenges were unsolvable with current technology. You can't build what physics won't allow. So what's actually being built today? A fraction of the original dream. Instead of 170 kilometers, we're looking at maybe 10 kilometers total by 2030. Instead of 9 million residents, perhaps 50,000 if they're optimistic. The mirrored walls are still there in the plans, but they're shorter, narrower, and far less ambitious. NEOM has quietly shifted focus to its other zones. Trojena, the mountain resort with artificial snow; Oxagon, the floating industrial city; Sindala, the luxury island destination. Projects that are challenging but actually buildable. The line isn't dead, but it's been transformed into something completely different. More like a high-end residential development with futuristic design elements than a revolutionary reimagining of human civilization. This scaling back sends shockwaves through the megaproject world. If Saudi Arabia, with virtually unlimited funding and government backing, can't make the line work, what does that say about other impossible construction dreams? The credibility gap is real. When governments announce trillion-dollar projects with impossible timelines, investors and contractors now point to the line as a cautionary tale. The gap between marketing renders and construction reality has never been more obvious. Other countries are taking note. China's Belt and Road projects are being reassessed. Dubai's future city plans are getting more conservative. The era of announcing impossible megaprojects for headlines might be ending. But there's a deeper lesson here. The line failed not because of money or political will, but because of physics and engineering reality. You can't solve fundamental design problems by throwing more resources at them. The linear city concept violates basic principles of urban planning that have evolved over thousands of years. Cities spread outward because that's how transportation, utilities, and human movement actually work efficiently. What we're witnessing is the collision between marketing-driven mega-project announcements and the hard constraints of engineering reality. The line became a symbol of what happens when ambition ignores physics. The renders looked incredible, the marketing was flawless, the vision was inspiring, but none of that matters when the fundamental concept is flawed from the beginning. So, yes, the trillion-dollar dream died before the first resident moved in, and what started as a revolutionary reimagining of human civilization became a cautionary tale about the limits of ambition. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories of megaprojects meeting reality right here on Bigger the Better.